As we go about implementing our rules as part of policies in small networks, it's not too hard at first because the rule base and the sets of rules are fairly simple. But as we get more and more rules and as we get more and more gateways, it's very likely that not every single gateway is going to have all the same features. For example, we might have some policy types that are focused on access control, which would include the firewall rules, the NAT rules, application control, URL filtering, and content awareness. And while one gateway may have those features installed, a different gateway in our environment may have additional blades enabled, including threat prevention, which may include IPS, anti-bot, antivirus, and threat emulation. So if we have one giant package of these policies that we're pushing out to all of our gateways, we're pretty much restricted to, in each of those rules of those policies, identifying exactly who the target will be. For example, the access control parts might go to both Firewall 1 and Firewall 2, and then in the rules for threat prevention, maybe we specify just Firewall 1. And that way, when we push out the same policy, Firewall 1 will get all the rules which included it as a target as part of those rule entries in our policy, and Firewall 2 would only get those rules that included it as a target on the individual rules as part of the policy. And using the individual rule option may not be the most efficient way of pushing out our policies to the respective gateways. Another option is to use multiple policy packages. So we could have one policy package for Gateway 1 or for all the gateways with a certain set of characteristics. And we could have a different policy package for a second category of gateways that had similar characteristics or the same blades enabled. So as part of the properties of the entire package, we could say package 1 is associated with a certain set of gateways. So when we install that policy, it'll only be installed on those specific gateways. And the same for policy package number 2. We identify, as part of that second policy package, the actual gateways that should get that policy, and then whenever we push policy number 2, it'll just be pushed out to those gateways associated with policy number 2. And here's what that could look like. So we have this policy here called just Firewall 1, and it's got the access control policy pieces as well as the threat prevention policy pieces, all as a policy package. And then we have a separate policy on this tab right here called just Firewall 2, with its own access control rules and its own threat prevention rules associated with this policy right here. And if we click in the upper left-hand corner on the menu icon, and then from the drop-down, select Manage Policies and Layers, here on the left with policy selected, it shows us our two policies. It's also identifying the policy targets, with this first policy just being pushed to Firewall 1 and the second policy being pushed just to Firewall 2. And to edit either of those, we simply click on the policy and click on Edit to change or modify the targets. And then when we go out to push those policies, click on Install Policy. From the Install Policy window here, from the policy drop-down, we'd select our first policy, which is just Firewall 1. And right here, based on how this policy package is configured, it knows it should be deployed just to Firewall 1. If we want to, we could go ahead and click right here on Policy Targets. It's showing Firewall 1 as a target because that's how the policy package is configured. However, if we wanted to override this, we could also modify it right here before we push it out. So by default, it's going to go to Firewall 1 only because that's how the package is defined. We'll click on OK, click on Install, and that policy package will be applied just to Firewall 1. And we'll give that a moment to complete. And if we've made changes to the policy called just Firewall 2, we want to push it out, we simply click on Install Policy. From the drop-down, we select the policy we want to push. The policy package is identifying Firewall 2 only. If that's what we want, we simply click on Install and let it complete. So in this nugget, we've identified how we can use separate policy packages to be applied or installed on individual gateways, which can be a much simpler option compared to individually selecting the target on each and every rule in our rule base in a policy that we're going to push out to multiple gateways. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.